Hey everyone, thank you guys so much for joining us for the first ever community-driven fundraising summit. My name is Noah Barnett and I run marketing here at Cosvox, and I'm going to be your host. We have 6 full packed hours of insightful conversations with nonprofit leaders from a variety of different organizations. Really an incredible group of organizations that are growing and thriving in today's connected economy, and we're grateful that we will have them a part of the conversation today. We also have a variety of thought leaders and individuals that just have a pulse on a specific aspect of fundraising, whether that's email or social media, or even just this idea of like, why are donors not giving anymore? And we're super excited to be able to partner with all of these organizations for today's summit. This summit would not have been possible without the people at Next After, Julia Campbell, Garrick Fundraising Associates, MPPH, Bloomerang, PSI, N Street Village, CCAN, and GLAD. We're so thankful for our partners, and we're excited for you all. This summit is all about the idea that together, we can really raise more and move our missions forward. And so you're a part of that conversation. And so as we go throughout today's summit, feel free to join in the conversation. Use the chat box. Our team is going to be monitoring that. If you have commentary or questions throughout the presentations, feel free to drop that in the chat pane. The important aspect of community is that together we can do much more. And so we're grateful that you're a part of this conversation and today's summit. We're going to kick off the summit because I thought it was really important. So we've been thinking a lot about this idea of community-driven fundraising and how it can really help organizations grow. But that didn't just come to be. This all started somewhere. And it really goes all the way back to the point of inception back in 2010 when Rob and Jeff, who are joining us now, actually started Cosvox. And so before we dive into a bunch of content, talk through tactics and strategies, I thought it was important to just remember where we've come and how we've gotten to today. And so I wanted Rob and Jeff to come on because so much of community-driven fundraising and kind of the movement that's building behind it started with Jeff and Rob back in 2010. So Jeff and Rob are the co-founders of Cosvox. Thanks for joining me, Rob and Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Noah. We're super excited. I'm Rob, CEO of Cosvox.
And I'm Jeff, the CTO of Cosvox. Again, we're really glad that you guys have joined, and we hope there's a lot for you to learn today. As Noah mentioned, we just kind of want to share our story a little bit, so don't want to take up too much time here. But we've been at Cosvox working at it for about 10 years now. We started, the idea for Cosvox actually came on a volunteer project that Rob and I were able to participate in. We went to Uganda to volunteer for a local nonprofit there. And as part of that project, we had to, of course, raise funds online. And back then, the tools were not so good at all. So being the type of people who like to make things easy, we actually made things incredibly hard by building our own system. So we built a fundraising page online. We built the tools to send out emails to our friends and family, and also a way for people to donate easily. And this actually turned out to be pretty successful. We were able to raise all of the funds that were needed to go, and everything was great. Now after coming back, we sat down and thought about how was there a way, I guess, for nonprofits to benefit from these types of tools?
Yeah, so we started talking to more and more nonprofits every single day. And what the same thing we heard over and over and over again from every nonprofit we talked to was that it was hard for them to do fundraising. So not only was it hard for them just to raise funds, whether from so many different channels, but also it was really difficult for them to raise awareness and to further their cause. In addition to that, all that was just compounded with this bigger issue of technology, where technology needed to be adopted, was super clunky, hard to use, and all these nonprofits are just wasting so much time every single day, but instead they could be actually furthering their mission. So that's where Cosmos came from 10 years ago, and those are the problems we want to solve for every organization today, especially every organization on this summit. And today, Cosbox, we're an online fundraising platform for nonprofits. Simply, we have an easy-to-use platform for you to launch your donation pages that convert more donors. We have an easy-to-use platform for you to do community-driven fundraising and to acquire new donors as well as reach new people. And also, we have this online platform all-in-one that allows you just to manage all your donors and contacts in one place, so you can spend less time on the administration and more time on furthering your impact in your programs. So today, that's what Cosbox is as a product, but also we develop a lot of fundraising education like this summit today to help equip you with the right fundraising arsenal and best practices so you can go out there and change the world. We're for the do-gooders that do, so the education is so important. And then very lastly, when you do use Cosbox, you get one-on-one hands-on support to help you further your fundraising plans and mission. Now, with all this, we've been trying to solve this for 11 years. And I think the one thing we realized that it takes a community to change a community.
Right. So in the same way, that we were able to rally our community around the things that were important to us, we hope that you would be able to do so as well in your fundraising endeavors.
Yeah. And we've seen this time and time again where organizations take a similar approach that we did 11 years ago, and they've been wildly successful. So today you'll hear from CCAN, for example, where they're able to raise over $100,000 every single year by using community-driven approaches. And our world is changing too. So all of these successes, these bright spots, the broader trend that we're seeing, which makes community-driven really important, community-driven fundraising really important, several things. One is that the donor behavior is actually changing. Instead of just mass emails and newsletters that people get in their inboxes, people are opting for one-on-one communication because they're just overwhelmed by all this noise and too much information. So it's better to be one-on-one. And in order for you to get your message across, community-driven fundraising helps you get to that one-on-one. The other big part that we've seen too is that technology is just changing so fast. So everybody basically has a computer in their pocket that can take them like anywhere. So they get messages, they get notifications, they get all this stuff. So it's easier to communicate with people more than ever. Then lastly, we're actually seeing some results. So organizations that use community-driven fundraising, they actually raise twice as much as organizations doing the old method of spraying and praying, of just blasting things out. So largely speaking, with all these trends, with some of these success and bright spots that you hear about today, community-driven fundraising is largely untapped. So what we also want to do just with community-driven fundraising is just to kind of leave you with 3 different tips, generally speaking, that will get detailed out in the summit.
Right. So tip number 1 would be to put in more than you take out. And what we mean by this is that as you're talking to your supporters and looking at potential donors, really to just invest and nurture them as well, to be good stewards of the attention they give you. I think oftentimes nonprofits, we think of potential supporters as things to people to take from, not necessarily, but I think to reframe it in that context just helps as well.
Yeah, I just got back from LA last night, and I was talking to a nonprofit over there, and they spend 3 hours. This one person, development person, spends 3 hours each single day nurturing her donors, just having conversations, sending emails, building that relationship, saying hi, all that good stuff. So it's really about, when it comes to community-driven fundraising, is to invest into your community. The second tip is to really be relational instead of transactional. So when you're going through the summit today, think about how you approach fundraising. Is it transactional? Are you just treating your donors as tip number 1, like an ATM? Or kind of take a look at your donation form. Is it just a donate button? Or are you offering your donors an experience that allows you to bridge the gap in building a relationship with your donors? So think about that as you go through the summit, and think about how you approach fundraising today.
Right. And the last tip would be to ask for help and not money. And so what we mean by that is that obviously your supporters, hopefully, they also donate, but not to just think of it strictly as potential donations, but really ask them to partner and to come alongside you just as you're sharing your story and as you're spreading more awareness about the things that are important to you.
Yeah, I think through these 3 tips, you'll have your donors fall in love with you. You'll be able to drive community-driven fundraising, integrate that into your fundraising playbook at your nonprofit. So we're super excited about today. Noah's going to share with you, what is community-driven fundraising, as well as how you can get your donors and your supporters to really support and grow your organization. So I'm going to hand it back to Noah. I'll be back later on, end of the day. Super excited about what you learned today. Thanks so much, guys.
Hey, Rob and Jeff, thank you guys so much, and for kind of sharing how this project, which is CosVox, really came out of this idea of you guys being a part of a community that wanted to support good and change in the world. And what we've seen over the past 10 years is that this is just continued. And so thank you guys for giving some of that background. As Rob mentioned, he's going to be back later today to help us wrap up the summit. And thank you guys for sharing those tips. So what we thought was also important to kick off today's presentation or today's summit was really by first and foremost sharing what is community-driven fundraising. Maybe you guys joined this because you were sent an email and you were excited about being a part of the first ever community-driven fundraising summit. But outside of that, you're like, hey, every day I go in and I have to fight for money from supporters. We do incredible work, but we can't figure out how to get more supporters or acquire new donors or really engage our supporters. And so what we're going to do now is really share what community-driven fundraising is all about and how you can actually use community-driven fundraising to help acquire new donors, further engage your supporters, and ultimately to help raise more to move your mission forward. And that's really what we see community-driven fundraising doing for those that are leveraging this approach to fundraising. And so let me go ahead and share this presentation with you for the next 45 minutes or so, just to give you an overview of what community-driven fundraising is. And what we see is that most fundraisers that we talk to, like Rob said, we spend a lot of time with our customers, or even just the broader nonprofit community. We travel all around the country. Rob was in LA last week, or yesterday. I was in Nashville last week, meeting with some AFP members, and also just meeting with our customers hand in hand to really say, how do we be true to what we believe? But when we meet with fundraisers, most of them feel like this. And what we believe and what we hope that you'll gain out of today's summit is that instead of having your head down and feeling frustrated because the fundraising efforts that you're doing now aren't working, or they're not enough, you're not raising the amount of money that you need, or people just seem not to care, we really hope to change you into someone, or hope that this is what you look like at the end, where you're really just punching fundraising in the mouth, you have a powerhouse approach, and you can understand how you can tap into your community to raise more money and move your mission forward. So we're going to talk through a few things. We're going to review a quick history of fundraising, just to kind of give context to where we've come from and where we're going, and then ask what's next in fundraising, which we believe is community-driven fundraising. Not to spoil it, but we believe community-driven fundraising is really the next wave of fundraising strategy that's going to help you build or raise more for your mission. And we're going to talk through why we believe that as well, based on some shifts and trends that are really impacting your fundraising. And then we're going to share our framework. We've spent 18 months or so really working on this framework, and not because it's new or different or anything that maybe you're already not doing somewhat of, but what we felt like was missing when we looked out into the world of fundraising strategy is that there wasn't a common language on how to go about this type of approach. How do you tap into your community, your supporters, to raise more for your mission? And so we've built a framework, which is really a set of language that you can use yourself, with your team, also with your board and others that are rallying together to really make a change in the world that your organization's fighting for. So before we dive into what's next, or kind of like why we think community-driven fundraising is key to your fundraising success going into 2019 and beyond, we have to see where we've come from. And so we did a quick synopsis in one slide. We can't do the history of fundraising justice in one slide, but this is kind of a general overview of kind of how fundraising has developed. And so pre-industrial revolution, mass communication, we had this kind of a localized fundraising approach where things were self-organized, they were collaborative. It involved personal outreach and small meetings and canvassing. And what I love about this approach is it was kind of the true essence of doing good in the world. What do-gooders that cared about something did. They went out and actually did it instead of talking about it or depending on politicians or other governments or organizations. They just went out and did it. And it was because they saw a need, they were close to the need, and they went out and made a difference. However, as we've evolved into more of a mass fundraising approach, organizations took kind of a mass approach to their fundraising, where there was more of these larger and larger national organizations that were coordinating efforts around the country and around the world. And this was great because we were able to scale up the impact. And this is kind of how we've seen philanthropy and other things grow especially here in the US, but around the world, was due to kind of this increased access of participation and communication that was coming out from organizations that were doing good. However, as part of that, and many of you have maybe grew up in this era, is it was undifferentiated. We kind of got direct response. We lost some of the personal touch side of fundraising and the work that we were doing, where we're gathering people together to fight for a change. It was about organizations doing good and people supporting that. It was about mass mailings, telefundraising, prospecting, TV advertising, all of these types of things that, though they were beneficial, it kind of took away some of the personalization side of the work that we were all doing and all fighting for. And then the internet came around, and basically we just put all our tactics that we learned in the mass fundraising era online, and really missed, I believe, and I spent 10 years almost fundraising for nonprofits, missed what the intent or what the true magic and opportunity was that we were gaining access to through the internet or through connectivity in general. We do email blasts, display ads, social ads. And so it was just this idea of we're going to send out a bunch of messages. We're going to use our channels as bullhorns for our cause. And again, that helped grow organizations and grow causes. But it also opened up 10 years of flatlined retention. It also hasn't really grown many organizations, and many organizations are struggling because they can't compete on budget and reach. And when they try, they lose touch of what we believe is really important in fundraising, which is building trust and building loyalty with your supporters. Like Rob mentioned, someone spending 3 hours a day really focused on their supporters and trying to personally connect and do outreach. And what we've seen is that the internet actually allows us, or technology allows us to scale that up. And that's what we hope to do here at CauseVox, is to help organizations scale this idea of personalization, and so that they can build connected, personalized relationships with their supporters and engage them in a way that they feel a part of, not merely giving to your organization's efforts. And so the question we've been asking for the past couple of years is, what's next? And we believe we have to start with a fundamental question, which is, what's different now? This comes from Eric Schmidt at Google. He challenges his teams to ask this question on a regular basis to ensure that they don't miss something that's really important. And so we want to illuminate some of the things that we've learned by asking this question. And the first is that the world you fundraise in has changed. And the world you fundraise in is rapidly changing all the time due to the pace of innovation, the pace of connectivity, and access to information becoming ubiquitous. And we feel like it's not about kind of pinpointing what those changes are, but rather looking at the macro level issues that are changing our society and also increasing the pace of change. And also give language to what is this new world that we're fundraising in? How do we define it? How do we think about it? Because those things are important. and foundational that are going to impact how you actually go out and raise money for your cause. And many of the organizations that are going to share today, the thought leaders that are going to share today, they've understood this at the foundation level of what they're going to be sharing as far as tips and tactics, all go back to this idea that access to information is now ubiquitous, which has resulted in a shift of power from organizations to individuals. It's also decreased the amount of trust that we have in institutions of all types, whether that's government, organizations, or your nonprofit, because people are increasing their trust in like-minded individuals because they have access to information, more information, and don't need to trust these other entities. And in addition, these entities have let us down. We've been through a series of years, and this isn't new, but a series of years where these types of flaws in large institutions continue to be revealed day in and day out. I got a notification a minute ago that just kind of reinforced this idea that big things, large organizations there's other things, there's a lack of trust that's going on there. And that breeds a cultural context where people are less focused and less loyal to organizations and more focused on causes, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. And so these types of shifts really require you to reframe how you approach fundraising. But in addition to that, it also gives you the opportunity to shift how you actually evaluate or look at the true value of your supporters. In today's connected economy, because people are looking to others, like-minded individuals, more frequently for where they should invest, where they should look next, where I should travel. I'm going to Phoenix next week. And it's like, where should I stay? And the first thing I did was ask my friends and family that were in the area or had experienced that, not necessarily went out. And then secondary, I went to other people that have traveled there and had experience, because I'm looking for trusted authority in like-minded community rather than say institutions or big brands that say, hey, we're the best hotel in town, we're the best restaurant in town. I'm seeking out others. And that's the power of influence that I think is underappreciated or under-discussed, at least when we surveyed the fundraising kind of strategy world, was that it was like, how do we actually tap into this holistic value of our supporters? And that's really what led us to develop community-driven fundraising and provide a framework to that, which many nonprofits are now adopting and seeing tremendous growth in their organization's effort. But it ultimately requires you in the connected economy to see the holistic value of your supporters. And Rob Wu, who you just saw earlier today, share kind of the story behind CauseVox. They made a big bet early on that people like that, there was more people like them that wanted to use more than just their money, but also their influence to support and to further various causes that they were passionate about, whether it's environmental or animals or healthcare or education or international relief. It doesn't really matter. But the idea was that they believed that more people were like them that wanted to be a part of, not merely give to, the causes that they were so passionate about. And he says it brilliantly here. Today's supporters are hyper-connected, live inside personal feeds, and discover and support causes recommended by their friends and desire to be a part of the change, not merely give to it. And many organizations, and maybe yours as well, are still just asking people to give to and not inviting them to be a part of. And this idea of being a part of is going to be a huge part of all the stories that we're going to share today on the summit, and all of the participants that are going to come on and talk through how they've been able to grow their missions or recommendations on how you can grow various tactics. It's all coming back to this idea of inviting people to be a part of, not merely give to. So if you walk away with nothing else from this summit, it's that you starting with that idea is how in this effort, in this fundraising appeal, in this event, where on our fundraising plan invites people to be a part of, not merely give to. That's the key foundation of community-driven fundraising, because we believe that previously the focus was on renting attention. And today it's about building relationships and inviting the people to be a part of. And then that ultimately means the people that build her trust and loyalty are the organizations that are going to succeed in today's connected world as we go through 2019 and beyond. attention is the most valuable currency in the connected economy. We can just look to the largest brands and companies in the world, and the reason they are evaluated or valued at a certain level is because of their ownership on attention and their ability to then monetize that attention. And so your organization in today's connected economy needs to be really tactful on how you steward the attention of your community and your audience, not only how you get that attention and the fundraising tactics you use to try to increase your reach or to reach new donors, but also once you have that attention, how are you building true relationships and being personal and human? And this quote by Seth Godin really wraps this up in like a little bow. And I think this is why I hope you feel the passion that I have about this. I spent 6.5 years working directly in a nonprofit on these types of issues. Like, how do we acquire new donors? How do we build better relationships with our donors? How do we retain our donors? How do we keep them? You know, that's sometimes just one of the biggest focus for nonprofits. How do we keep our supporters? They keep going away. We spend all this effort trying to acquire them and they're going away. And I think it's because of some of these macro shifts and changes that our strategies need to live up to and to recognize as a valuable part of what work we're doing. And that's going to take all of us that are working on the do-gooders, that are working on passion projects and change, to really understand how do we build connected organizations in today's connected economy that invite people to be a part of, not merely give to the efforts that we're pushing forward. Some organizations will thrive from this increased chaos. Some will be unprepared and some will merely fight it and lose. And we believe those who thrive will build relationships instead of renting the attention of our donors. The tactics that we've used previously aren't working as well or becoming more costly. And there's also secondary issues where it's not scalable because we're not leaning in to the key assets of our connected economy, which is our communities, our supporters, their influence, their time, how they can actually help us amplify our reach, acquire new donors, and ultimately raise more for our missions. And the reality is that if we don't adapt to change, we have story after story of organizations that were thriving, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, and then ultimately go out of business because they didn't see the change. Well, not that they didn't see it, but they didn't do anything about it. And you guys are already doing something about it because you're a part of this conversation today. And so what we hope to do is help illuminate this strategy, maybe even identify areas that you're already doing this. And so we've developed this framework that really helps organizations put into language how they can approach today's supporter, how they can acquire them, how they can retain them, and really ultimately connect them into the organization so that they're building a stronger community of supporters and advocates for their cause. And we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so really unpacking this. But the thing is, and why we believe so strongly in this framework, is because we're seeing it work every day here at CauseVox and in so many other ways through our communities, where people are focusing more on this idea of bringing people together to be a part of the change and seeing how they're able to advance their missions, advance their good. And this is across all the aisles, all the divides, all types of organizations, big and small. We have an opportunity to work with all of those organizations. It's incredible to see the ones that are growing, the ones that are thriving, really understand the power of their community. And this actually looks like a lot of different things. So we're going to, later in today's summit, have a bunch of examples where organizations are going to share about their community-driven fundraising efforts. We have a panel coming up at noon. We also have 2 deep dives. We're actually going to dive deeply into 2 organizations' community-driven fundraising efforts and initiatives. You're going to be able to tease that out. But community-driven fundraising is really just an umbrella for this idea that our fundraising initiatives and programs, that you're inviting people to be a part of your efforts and you're activating them and then rallying your community to actually inspire others to become supporters of your organization. So these can be launched by your organization, like events and campaigns. It can be launched by your organization in the form of giving days or projects. annual campaigns, virtual capital campaigns. Organizations are getting really creative about this. And again, we focus so much on the tactics that we say, oh, crowdfunding is a tactic, or peer-to-peer is a tactic, or events, or third party, or DIY. We get caught up in that, but there wasn't really an umbrella that said, what is this? Why is this working? And what is the movement that is really foundational that's pushing these efforts forward? And we believe that is community-driven fundraising. And that umbrella brings along all of these things launched by your supporters too, like peer-to-peer and DIY. We're going to deep dive into DIY at 1:15 today. And it's going to be incredible to share stories of supporters that have actually inspired and rallied hundreds of people to raise thousands, if not millions of dollars for organizations that are tapping into the power of their community. And then additionally, there's personal crowdfunding and cause-based fundraising. People today, regardless of the generations, when you look at the stats, are eager and believe that they want to invest in the world's most important issues. Everyone has something that they want to be a part of. I think a fundamental truth, regardless of who you are, is that you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And we find that in causes that we're excited. You know, my focus is in helping people realize what their passions are. That's something I'm passionate about. But also causes like education and the importance of access to education. Those are the things that I'm passionate about. And so I seek out opportunities for me to be a part of those cause initiatives. And maybe that's why you ended up in the role that you're in at your nonprofit, because you chose to step in to the role of a fundraiser to work on that cause at your nonprofit. But there's so many others that are doing other things. They're not employees, they're not part of the staff of your nonprofit, but they're just as passionate and excited about the causes that you're working on. And these types of campaigns invite them to be a part of that and tap into that, and ultimately helps build retention and raise more to move your mission forward. So let's unpack this. Let's spend the next 20 minutes together really understanding this. And we want this to be kind of a conversation. You know, we're going to have other conversations throughout the day, but if you have questions or comments, feel free to drop those in the chat pane. I loved something that came in earlier when Rob and Jeff were talking, where Emily said, you know, she loves this idea that it takes a community to change a community. And that idea is really foundational to the work that we all do and are a part of at our nonprofits daily. So if you have other things that you want to add to the conversation, feel free to do that. Drop it in the chat pane. If you have specific questions, that's what the Q&A is for. So feel free to drop that in. So let's go ahead and dive in and start unpacking community-driven fundraising and give some more concrete examples of what this kind of looks like. So the first part of this framework that we developed is the idea that you want to inspire people in the community. And this community isn't like just your local community. So like I live in a city, I'm not just saying my community. Your community could be people that care deeply about the work that you're doing, or are passionate or excited about the cause that you're working on. People in your community could be known to you. So maybe it's your email list or your subscribers or your volunteers, or people that have just connected or experienced. Like we have an arts organization in Maryland that they have people coming in and out of their facilities every single day. And so they know that those individuals are benefiting from the work that they are doing. And those people are part of that organization's community. And the first step in the community-driven fundraising framework is to find ways through various fundraising initiatives to inspire people in the community to become supporters. And the reason we chose the word inspire is because we wanted to, again, give different language to some of the more common narratives that even fundraisers really help amplify, and even donors kind of think when you ask them, you know, what their opinion is of charity. And the idea of inspire is that you're filling somebody with the urge or ability to do or feel something and giving rise to. This is very different than the common language we use in fundraising, which is guilt. Where as fundraisers, we're really trying to guilt people or convince people or manipulate them or kind of tie their hands around their backs so that they are in an environment where there's pressure and maybe they give us a little gift. But the thing about guilt is guilt doesn't drive deeper engagement. Guilt is something that you do as a response to get rid of the consequences or the feelings associated with guilt. it doesn't bring someone along with you. It doesn't give rise to. And when you look at retention stats, I think it's interesting. New donor retention's at 25% nationally, and sometimes even lower than that. And it's like, why are we spending so much effort convincing new people or guilting people into giving to our organizations just for them never to give again? When I worked at a nonprofit, I saw firsthand that when we created environments, when we created campaigns, how we did even letters or events, or how we talked about the work that we were doing, the language that we used, when we focused on calls to action that inspired people, that's when we were able to drive the highest retention rates in our donors, not the ones that we, mass prospected for and somehow guilted them in, a midst of thing to try to get them to give us money. And this isn't new. This is something that people have been talking about since forever. The founder of Save the Children put it this way, it's our job as fundraisers, as nonprofit leaders, do-gooders, as Rob said, have to devise a means of making known the facts in such a way as that we touch the imagination of the world. The world is not ungenerous, but unimaginative and very busy. And I think even if we thought about that and gave language to that as fundraisers, that's our job to inspire people to live out their passions, what they're excited about, how they want to steward the opportunities and kind of advantages or privileges that they've been given in a way that identifies with causes that they're passionate about and they're excited about. And how you really do that and why that's important is because people, again, are more cause-oriented rather than organization. Attention's finite and competition is fierce and broad. And so guilt only works in an environment where you can pin someone down and try to guilt them. With so many distractions in the world that we live in, whether it's cat videos or BBC notifications or whatever channel of news that you follow or stream of personal feeds or Instagrams, all of this is distracting us from paying attention to certain things. So it's very easy for us to opt out or to move away from anytime we feel an uncomfortable feeling. And so this idea of inspiration, though, is pinpointing it as I, as the person, as the supporter, can be a part of something. You're giving me a channel or access to helping to make a difference and being a part of something that's bigger than myself. That's something that's worth paying attention to. And that's why our organizations need to be more creative. And that's what community driven really inspires you to do it. The examples today are incredible to hear how people are doing that. Also, inspiration builds trust and loyalty, which in the connected economy are the key assets you need to really steward attention and ultimately build your community of supporters. And also, inspire isn't this like just do good, happy feeling, but it doesn't just have to be positive. It's just rather something that gives rise and sparks sharing. And Jonah Berger is a professor and author of Contagious. He's also a professor at the Wharton Business School. Says, whether you're selling soda, car insurance, or presidential candidates, evoking emotion increases word of mouth. I would also promote like the causes that you're working on, the most important things in change efforts or community efforts where you're filling in gaps. Like these are something that need to invoking emotion increases word of mouth. But when you think about how to evoke emotion, you need to use activating rather than deactivating. And this includes things like anger and excitement. And so the mistake we see common with this idea of inspiration is that we showcase contentment or that there's not tension in the narrative that gives your community an opportunity to step in and say, I want to fill that gap. And so that's why we chose this idea of inspire. And so how do you do that? How do you inspire? The examples we're going to share later today in the summit are really going to fill in this and give brilliant and vibrant color to this. But here's just some quick things. First and foremost, we as nonprofits need to move away from the grant application fundraising tactics, which include stats and how big we are and what we're doing and the impact that we're having. And it's all about numbers and kind of spreadsheet mechanics that help us showcase how well we're doing. Those things aren't untrue, but those don't inspire. And so as we lean heavier on storytelling, the stories behind the work that we're doing. And I haven't met a nonprofit yet that I haven't been able to help uncover stories. And the question I invite people to ask themselves, if you're struggling, like, okay, I get it, but like stories work, but like, we do X, Y, and Z that's, there's no stories here. It's just hard work. and no one cares. I ask the question two different ways. The first is, if your organization stopped doing the work that you're doing, like who would care? And by who, I mean like people, like who would actually care? Who at the end of the day would be impacted by this? And typically when you flesh that out, there's some sort of people story behind the work you're doing, whether it's environmental or animal charities, or even in politics or international relief or community services. There's always this idea that there's a person or people that would be negatively impacted by your absence if you shut down tomorrow. And that's where you can start teasing out stories like, who are those people? Why would those people be impacted? And those are the stories that you can use to tell why your organization matters and invite people to be a part of continuing to serve those people in a way that maybe is slightly disconnected, but it's heavily important for the work that you're doing. We had a nonprofit that was kind of a third party that worked with other nonprofits to help them amplify their work and be more tactful in how they did their work, all using data and data modeling. And what was incredible is that when we talked to their team about this, the real stories weren't just helping those nonprofits do the work that they were doing, even though that was the direct contribution they were having, but rather the people that they were impacting through those nonprofits. And so occasionally it takes one or two leaps to really uncover the true stories, but the fact that their nonprofit was helping other nonprofits amplify, streamline, be more cost effective with their work, and ultimately help impact more and more people through whatever programming they were having, that's where the story is. And those are the stories that the organization could uncover. And so stories over stats are essential regardless of the type of organization you are. And Julia Campbell's actually going to come on and talk through that a little bit more at 3 o'clock today, and how you can really use storytelling to build a community around your organization. You also want to keep it contextual and personalized. All fundraising efforts that inspire really meet people where they are, and it's a bridge to get them to what the invitation is. How do you invite them into the story of the work that you're doing, and not just saying, we're doing all this stuff over here, you should come join us, but rather being that bridge. That's a fundraiser's job, is to be that bridge between where someone is, what they're doing, to the work that you're doing. And to do that really well, you have to keep it human and personalized. Stories really connect us, and we've seen the stats. 56% of people say that they donate because of compelling storytelling. And ultimately, stories are easier to share. If I talk about my organization's effort that there's 3.2 million orphans in a specific part of East Africa, and they've been without parents or a home for a really long time, and this has been going on for 15 years. We've been able to build 72 homes and help those children, but we're still only 10% to the capacity that we really want to be a part of. Like, all of that's great and super awesome, but you're not going to walk away with that. And so as we tell stories and use stories to inspire, we're actually designing our fundraising to be shared with others. Because when I talk about a little boy named Jonathan, who lived in an environment where his parents abandoned him at the age of 3, but then an organization stepped in and people and supporters came and said, that isn't right. Education should be available to all, not based on just where you grew up or the circumstances that you came into the world with. And those supporters gave Jonathan the opportunity to begin to see the world differently. It gave him the opportunity to dream. And now Jonathan is pursuing an education. It's still a long road ahead, and that's why we need continued supporters to come alongside us to help children like Jonathan every single day in the work, and that's where you can step in. Now Jonathan's story is this conduit, this banner flag that you can hang on to and might share with friends or talk through and be like, yeah, I heard about this kid named Jonathan. Let me share that with you. Stories connect us, and also they're designed in a way to be shared. See incredible organizations like World Bicycle Relief using powerful storytelling, using multimedia content, whether it's video and photos, or simply just using written word. The power of words is incredible. And when you're able to tap into that, you can see the results. Telling stories of one. The work you're doing is bigger than one, but it's important to kind of simplify it down sometimes to give some anchors to the work that you're doing. And that's really what the idea of Inspire builds upon. City did something similar where they just said, we want to challenge people to think what we can do together so that every child can fill in the gap. And we've all been in a place of maybe missed opportunity or something where someone had to step in to help us get to the next level. Even though we want to think, especially in that kind of a Western culture, that we're all pulling ourselves out of everything. There's no one else paving the way. Like, we can just do it. And we're the only ones responsible for the ways that we are. That narrative isn't true. Someone paved a way, someone helped pull you up. I think the idea that City tapped into is that, like, you now can also be and create opportunity for others by being a part of this campaign was an incredible way to use story and inspiration to really bring people from their community into becoming supporters of their organization's efforts. The next part of this framework is this idea of activate. And this is kind of the key part. Like, how do you actually activate people and draw them out? Like, they're capable of doing more. And how do we tap into that, especially earlier on when we're cultivating new donors? And the idea of activate is that you want to draw people in. This is the part we've been talking about throughout today's kind of intro overview, is that this is the part where you invite people to be a part of something. And when you invite someone to be a part of something, you don't just drop them and wait till the next time you need their money. They're not an ATM. It's not a transactional relationship, but rather a continual relationship that's being built up over time. And that's where the idea of activation comes in, where you're actually bringing people into the organization in a way that they can use other aspects of their passions and kind of commitment to the organization to help move your organization forward. And the reason this is even more important in the connected economy is that we're just seeing incredibly decreasing engagement directly with brands. I'll switch back to the slide in a minute, but 50% of our brands are seeing a decrease of engagement of 50%. Email engagement's dropping. I don't have the slide in this. And again, goes back to this idea that, like, people are looking to others, and we can see platforms like Amazon even that leverages peer reviews, or opportunities like Airbnb or Uber, where there's this idea of this human relational connection that we feel a little bit more connected with and seek out, like Yelp reviews or other restaurant type reviews. We're seeking out others' opinions and connecting personally with them to evaluate how we invest our money and our time and our efforts. And so tapping in or activating your community gives you a force of promotion to help drive your organization forward. How do you get people talking about your effort? And again, it starts with inspire, but then it moves into this idea of activate. How people discover, research, and make purchase decisions has shifted. And ultimately, you're going to help unlock the true value of your supporters when you intentionally focus on activating your supporters. It's not just about retention, it's about activation. How do you activate them to be a part of the work that you're doing? When asked, 85% of donors actually prefer being asked by friends and family. And this stat really doesn't even do justice, because I think it just affirms some of the larger shifts that we're seeing. So how do you actually do this? First and foremost, we encourage nonprofits that are thinking through this to really just identify opportunities. Like, where in your current organization are there people that are excited and connected to your organization that you could think about ways to intentionally activate them, or ask them to do more, or provide them an opportunity to go out and raise money on your behalf, or to host an event. I went to an event earlier this week, I guess it was on Monday night, where a nonprofit had said, hey, we're going to host an event. We're going to invite people to it. We're going to share the story of the organization. And the ask is for them to host other events like that. And so now they're on their second tier, and they're going to build off a third tier, where they're just helping, or they're tapping into the voice of the supporter to help grow and amplify their reach, which is ultimately going to help them acquire more donors. And it drives back to their capital campaign that they're doing, where they're trying to raise $800,000, $900,000 more dollars over the next couple of years to provide kids that graduate public high schools with a promised scholarship to go to community college, or a grant to go to other colleges. And so it's an important effort in our community. But their ask was, will you use your voice to help move this effort forward, which was an incredible experience to be a part of something like that. And that really how this idea of activation really works. We've seen organizations like N10 really challenge their boards to be a part of the efforts in this way. Organizations like the Motherhood Collective, who had a passionate group of volunteers that they just never were able to fully tap into for fundraising. But over the years, they've been able to slowly bring in programming and intentionality to this effort, where they're challenging volunteers to share their stories. And volunteers have been more than happy to do that. And that's helping them reach more donors and ultimately raise more money for their mission. And it started small. Like when they introduced this idea, they only raised $7,000 in the first year, but then 24,000. And this year they almost raised, or last year in 2018, they almost raised $40,000. And this idea of a small organization being able to tap into the power of their supporters' voice is really the essence behind community-driven fundraising. Because as you rally your community of supporters, not control them, you're able to tap into their voice, invite them to be a part of increasing retention, increasing engagement, but ultimately helping you amplify your reach and inspire new donors to be a part of your organization. And this idea requires your nonprofit to lead and not manage. And so it's not just your responsibility to do fundraising, but you're inviting people to be a part of that. And that is communicated through our language, how we posture towards our donors. You're creating ownership, you're building momentum. Ultimately, this helps scale organizations' efforts, which is an incredible opportunity. And it provides a delightful experience and strengthens the relationship with your supporters. And we've seen so many organizations, like I said, we work with 1,500 nonprofits every single year here at CosVox to implement this type of framework. And they're seeing growth, they're seeing impact by thinking differently about how they tap into their community, the community's voice and influence to raise more. And this is backed up by statistics like this, where Americans who volunteer their time and skills, this includes their voice. I think sometimes we think volunteers like, oh, they're like hard skills, or they're, we don't have volunteer opportunities because like we don't have people to just like stuff envelopes or something. Rather saying, hey, people that are engaged in nonprofits actually give 10 times more on average to charity than people who don't volunteer. And I would like to say with confidence that the organizations that are providing those opportunities are the ones that are going to benefit the most from this increase. And that's really what community-driven fundraising provides you and your organization. So how do you do this? You want to empower people to actually be a part of. So again, this is rallying, not controlling. So how do you invite people to do that? How do you keep momentum going? And so your role is to lead those people as they go out and advocate for your organization, not control them. How do you provide training and tools? Your community might not fully understand how to promote your organization's efforts, but with equipping them with stories and other assets that they can use, ideas like the one I experienced on Monday, which is, hey, will you host an event like this? A small gathering with maybe 20 people, 15 people that come together and just learn about our organization's efforts. That's how you can be a part of this movement that we're creating that says we value our kids in this community and we want to do something about it and help that forward. That's something, again, is this idea they're providing avenues, they're providing resources. Others that are sharing today are going to share other ways that happens, where they invite people to be a part of something or to actually host a walk in their community or go out and share it with their friends and family in a way that's slightly different or virtual. And so all of this is the idea that you're inviting people to be a part of, not merely give to your organization's efforts. And that's really what community-driven fundraising is all about. We saw this with the Junior Achievement of Washington, D.C. They have corporate partners. And what they say is like, we want to tap into the influence that our corporate partners have. And so how can we equip them with an opportunity where they can use their influence on their employees, but ultimately their employees' voice actually go out and raise money. And when they implemented this and scaled it up through CosVox, they were able to raise $500,000 a year now through this effort, this single effort where they just said, hey, our community, our corporate sponsors have a voice and we want to tap into them. Likewise with Amigos International, volunteers, supporters, board members, this is an important part of their fundraising strategy and engagement, where they're saying, hey, we're going to bring you in the fold, and then we're going to equip you with the opportunity to go out and fundraise on our behalf. They provide a toolkit, which is kind of like, hey, this is how we talk about our organizations. This is how you can go out and share. They give them stories of the impact they've had, videos even, to help them inspire others to become supporters. And so this idea of community-driven fundraising really falls back on the reevaluating or reframing the value of your supporters. And I hope that this summit, and this is why I'm so excited about today's thing, is that I'm passionate about this, and our organization and our team at CauseVox are passionate about this because we've seen this firsthand. And today's summit, which is the first time ever we've been able to put this together, and the fact that we had, I think, over 1,600, 1,700 people actually register to be a part of this moment, says that this isn't just something we're passionate about, but this is something other people believe in. And we're excited to have individuals now coming together and kind of sharing that for the rest of the afternoon. And so this framework of community-driven fundraising is something that we're going to come back to over and over and over again as we push through